On a recent date night, after a few drinks, I made a remark to my husband that I deeply regret. Since then, our marriage has been hanging by a thread. To give some context, I first met my husband when we were teenagers working at the same call center. Back then, nothing romantic happened. He left for college and I stayed at the job until I graduated high school. 5 years later, we crossed paths again, started dating, and eventually got married. We're now parents to two children. Today, my husband is 27 and I'm 25. 6 months after giving birth to our second child, I started taking a new birth control pill. It had some unexpected side effects, including completely killing my libido. My husband tried initiating intimacy, but I kept turning him down. After 2 weeks, he stopped trying. When another week passed without any attempts, I snapped and demanded, "Why haven't you tried to have sex with me?" Soon after, we had our first real date night since the baby's arrival. We stopped at a bar near our house for drinks, and feeling tipsy, I admitted to my husband that I felt guilty, like I'd cheated on him. Naturally, he was alarmed and asked why. I told him about a dream I'd had the previous week involving a former coworker. In the dream, he confessed he liked me, and I told him I felt the same. What happened next was a disaster. I started scrolling through this guy's social media in front of my husband, pointing out random details and even criticizing the appearance of the woman in one of his photos. As if that wasn't bad enough, I rambled about a fling I'd had with this coworker after my husband left for college. I described moments where he tickled me and even recounted a passionate instance where he pushed me against a wall. Then, I blurted out that maybe I was sharing all this because I wanted my husband to do something similar. The next morning, my husband was furious, not just about what I'd said, but about how I'd been acting over the past month. He felt deeply hurt that I'd shown no interest in intimacy with him for weeks, but had ogled another man's profile while reminiscing about a past fling. When I offered to have sex to make things better, he snapped, "Your body's been off limits for a month, but one night of talking about this guy screwing you finally turns you on?" Since then, things have been rocky. Although we've had moments of peace, my comments keep resurfacing, leading to heated arguments. My husband believes I settled for him because he graduated college, got a good job, and the other guy was no longer an option. He's convinced I'd cheat with that coworker, if given the chance. When he asks why I brought up the coworker, I explain it wasn't about him. I was nostalgic for how I felt back then, confident and attractive. Over the years, I've gained 75 pounds, and my self-esteem has suffered. My husband now believes I've stayed with him out of depression, while that coworker represents a time when I felt truly alive. He's grown withdrawn, emotionally distant, and hardly speaks to me. He doesn't touch me anymore, and we haven't been intimate in 2 months. His detachment extends to our children. He said he wishes I had ended up with the coworker so he wouldn't have to deal with this pain. I love my husband deeply and don't want a divorce, but I can't keep living like this. I've apologized repeatedly, promised to make things right, and taken steps to rebuild our relationship. I've unfriended the coworker on social media, started working out with my husband, and avoided mentioning the coworker entirely unless my husband presses for answers. Despite these efforts, our sex life remains inconsistent, heavily influenced by whether my husband is dwelling on the issue. During arguments, he brings up details I shared, the coworker's height, his hair, and the fact that he was my boss. He even says things like, "Do you really think that guy would look at you now? You've gained so much weight." These comments hurt deeply, especially since I'm already self-conscious about how my body has changed after 2 pregnancies. I've tried explaining that my feelings for the coworker are non-existent and that my remarks were about missing a version of myself. While my husband seems reassured for a time, he inevitably spirals back into hurt and mistrust. We've been together for 7 years and have 2 children. The thought of our marriage ending over this is unbearable. I'm doing everything I can to show my love and commitment, but I feel like I'm losing him. I've reassured my husband time and again that my feelings for that man were nothing more than a fleeting moment of reminiscing, a brief lapse in judgment. I've never thought of him as anything significant since committing to my husband. Yet, even small actions, like liking a social media post, have turned into massive arguments. When I once had a dream about him and foolishly confessed it to my husband, it only escalated things further. Now, he constantly questions if I still fantasize about that man or whether I even find him attractive anymore. I've tried to convince him repeatedly that my love and attraction are solely for him, but the hurt runs deep. It feels like no matter how much I do or say, it's never enough. I just want to find a way to mend the distance between us, to return to the love we shared before all of this. I can't believe you're making this about me now, I said, crossing my arms tightly, my voice laced with defiance. Eric sank into a chair, looking utterly defeated, as if the weight of everything had finally crushed him. He twisted the cap off a water bottle and took a slow, deliberate sip before speaking. Imagine needing to disappear for a whole day just to feel some peace. Let that sink in. A lump rose in my throat, but I refused to let it show. My voice wavered with frustration. Don't even try to flip this around. I know what you're doing, playing the victim to make me feel guilty. He leaned back in the chair, his face unreadable, his words cutting deeper than I wanted to admit. For years, I thought my job was to protect you from stress from life. I never thought I'd have to protect myself from you. The silence between us was thick and suffocating. I struggled to find the right words before finally managing a shaky, "Are you done?" Eric nodded and stood, his movements slow and deliberate. "Yeah, I'm done." Without another word, he disappeared into the bedroom, leaving me frozen in place, his words echoing in my mind. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, scrolling aimlessly through my phone, trying to distract myself. A video popped up, a relationship expert discussing men and their silence. Men often bear their struggles quietly, the speaker said solemnly. They don't ask for help. They retreat. I rolled my eyes and kept scrolling, but his words stuck in my mind like a stubborn echo. The next morning, Eric was gone. No note, no text, just an empty spot where his car should have been. My chest tightened as I grabbed my phone, hastily typing out a message. Leaving without a word? Real mature, Eric. I hit send and waited. Nothing. The kids' voices filled the house as they got ready for school, but my nerves were frayed. Logan, our 6-year-old, tugged at my sleeve. "Mommy, can you tie my shoes?" he asked in a small voice. "Not now, Logan," I snapped, barely glancing at him. From the other room, Emma, our 9-year-old, whined loudly. "I can't find my tablet. Emma, if you keep crying about that tablet, I swear I'm going to lose it." I yelled, my voice sharper than I intended. Logan stood quietly, his wide, unblinking eyes, so much like Eric's, staring at me. Guilt crept up my spine as I exhaled slowly and knelt to tie his shoes. By early afternoon, Eric finally responded. "I'll be back later. Don't wait up." My heart pounded as I read the message. I immediately called him. When he answered, his tone was cold and detached. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Don't wait up," I demanded. "It means exactly what it says," he replied flatly. Before I could respond, he hung up. That evening, Eric returned, much later than usual. He moved methodically, setting his keys on the counter, draping his jacket over a chair, without saying a word. I stood watching him, anger bubbling beneath my skin. When he finally looked at me, his expression wasn't one of anger or exhaustion. It was emptiness. "Are you done sulking?" I asked, my tone sharper than I intended. For a moment, he said nothing. Then, with a weary sigh, he replied softly, "I'm tired, Claire." There was something in his voice that made my chest tighten, a kind of exhaustion that sleep couldn't fix. I folded my arms, refusing to lower my guard. "Yeah, well, so am I. You think I have it easy?" He didn't take the bait. No sharp comeback. No sarcastic remark. He just looked at me, a long, searching gaze that left me unsettled. "That's the problem," he said quietly. "I don't think you even know what you want. But I do now." His words were deliberate and precise, like punches that landed squarely. "What the hell does that mean?" I asked, my voice tinged with desperation. Eric didn't respond. Instead, he walked to the bedroom, opened the closet, and pulled down his old black duffel bag.